First, the 7-year-old boy facing death because his parents' religious beliefs prohibit blood transfusions. The couple, devout Jehovah's Witnesses, acknowledge their son needs a liver transplant but refuse to consent to him receiving blood. As Jenna Hudson reports, they're headed to the Supreme Court.
We understand this is very stressing for you, but how can you deny your son the treatment he needs to survive?
We are talking about the difference between potentially a child dying or surviving.
You could give him the consent to have this blood transfusion. Why won't you? Why can't you?
Parents around the country are right now shocked and angry at the heartbreaking determination of this mum and dad. Their 7-year-old son has a genetic disease that's shutting down his liver, and he will die unless he has a liver transplant. Problem is, mum and dad are devout Jehovah's Witnesses, and they're refusing to give consent to one vital part of the surgery their son so desperately needs.
Is that the risk that you're willing to take?
The blood transfusion their little boy will most certainly need during the operation is completely against their religious beliefs.
For Jehovah's Witnesses, there are essentially no exceptions for the acceptance of blood transfusions.
How can you deny your son, though, of a blood transfusion he so desperately needs?
Please leave me alone.
The Children's Health Queensland Hospital is taking the parents to the Supreme Court in a fight for the little boy's life. In these documents, it states the parents are aware their child will die within 2 years without this treatment. But on the consent form, the father has crossed out the words blood transfusion.
I don't believe that the argument that you can have a transplant without a transfusion is logical, because you still have some residual blood from the donor in the transplanted organ.
Dr. Ross Walker is one of the only Australian medical practitioners who is willing to talk on camera about this sensitive topic.
When we're talking about the life of a child, I think people's own religious beliefs have to stand aside.
This is the little boy's paediatric gastroenterologist. In court documents, she shares her deepest concerns.
Death is an inevitable consequence of liver failure unless a liver transplant is performed. In a small patient, even a relatively small amount of blood can be significant.
All doctors involved in this controversial and delicate case cannot be interviewed because this medical tug-of-war is still before the Supreme Court.
You can't have the transplant without the transfusion in the vast majority of cases.
A doctor in the court affidavit also states if the boy has the liver transplant with the blood transfusion soon, he has a 90% chance of surviving for another 5 years and a 72% chance of living for more than 25 years. Doctors also say the sicker the little boy gets, the harder it is to carry out the liver transplant at all.
These are very intricate operations, and there's quite a deal of blood loss that goes with the operation.
Jehovah's Witnesses believe the Bible commands they must not ingest blood. They say blood represents life and only God is the giver of life. We're told what these parents are fearing is that their child will be polluted, both spiritually and morally.
Really not accepting blood transfusions, perhaps even in a situation where it might be a case of life and death, is essentially considered a small price to pay for eternal life.
University of Queensland Dr. Tom Eckner is a lecturer in history of religious thought.
So these decisions about whether a child will live and die, perhaps regarding accepting a blood transfusion or not accepting, must be viewed in terms of what God would want for that child.
In the eyes of a Jehovah's Witness, how would they view this case?
I think that Jehovah's Witnesses would see this as the government impinging upon very central and foundational beliefs that they have, that they've based their lives upon.
Look, we just wanted to find out, how is your son feeling today?
The boy's parents aren't willing to defend their decision, which could ultimately kill their son.
He could die without a blood transfusion. Is that the risk that you're willing to take?
It's my opinion that religion should have no role in the operating theatre. We're talking about life and death situations as opposed to someone's personal philosophy, especially when you're inflicting that personal philosophy on your child.
Are you willing to sacrifice his life for your religion? Is that what it is?
I said leave me alone.
There are many controversial cases relating to Jehovah's Witness children and blood transfusions. In Sydney this year, a pregnant Jehovah's Witness and her baby tragically died after the woman refused a blood transfusion. Also in New South Wales in 2013, the Supreme Court overruled the wishes of a 17-year-old Jehovah's Witness suffering from a lethal form of blood cancer. In London last year, a High Court judge ruled that the son of two devout Jehovah's Witnesses can be given blood. And in Dublin in 2008, a High Court judge said a 4-year-old girl could undergo a life-saving blood transfusion, despite her parents' objections.
I don't believe that Jehovah's Witnesses are irrational people. I don't believe that we can just simply label them as good or bad. It's not that black and white.
And I think in that situation, we've got to do what's best for the child.
Is your religion more important to you than your son's life?
And a directions hearing on that case is expected to take place later this month. We will let you know the outcome.